Okay. Oh.
Yep.
I've got a couple of questions,
Yes.
Venerable Robina. First one, just relating to the animal skins in the dying person's room. My mother actually sleeps on a sheepskin.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's like, all I can tell you is what they say, you know, then we can make our own calls on it. It's like, I remember, yes, all I can say. What can I say? All I can tell you is what they say. I don't know what else to say.
I might encourage her to lose the sheepskin
That's
soon.
interesting. Under her sheet, you mean? Under her sheet.
Yes, under her sheet, yeah.
It might be get something synthetic.
Yes, like a wool underlay.
Yeah, but see, on the other hand, the yogis sit on animal skins, so maybe because they're yogis and they're able to transfer or transform it or something. I don't know. Yeah. So then?
Second question is just related to Amitabha's Pure Land.
Yes.
If you do a deity practice, this recommendation is still to aspire to go to Amitabha's Pure Land rather than your deity's.
I know, I understand.
Pure
That's
Land.
the interesting point. And that's only something that I've just discovered recently since doing this book. The way Rinpoche talks is very clear. That, you know, we have all the Buddhas have their own Pure Lands. But as Rinpoche is saying, and I've never really heard it so clearly before, and maybe it has been, is that even if you want to go to the others, unless you've got high realizations, unless you realize emptiness, most of the time, unless you've got a direct realization of emptiness, you're just not qualified to go there. They're for very advanced beings. That's the point. So there's no contradiction to go to Amitabha's because all the Buddhas, well, they're all connected to the different Buddha families anyway, you know. So that seems to be the point, that it's the only one that is where ordinary deluded people who haven't realized emptiness can go. That, for me, is the clear point that he's making. Yeah, that's my point. Yeah, that's Rinpoche's point, isn't it? Yes.
Robina, I'm just thinking about people that die in different states of dementia.
Yes.
And my mother has dementia.
Yes.
It's not advanced, but
It's
I've seen...
not advanced, no.
No. But it may be by the time she dies.
That's right. Exactly.
And I've seen people quite disturbed at the point of death with dementia.
Precisely.
Just wondering the best thing,
Yeah,
I suppose there's no difference.
Rinpoche's idea, Rinpoche's point, and is the only way you can help them is by having sounds of prayers. The only way. There's no other way. You can't get them to... I mean, even ordinary of us, most of us are hopeless. We can't put our minds together, you know. But the only way to help is to have the power of say, the Buddhist mantras, the prayers, very peaceful and quiet. That's what I said. One experience I had at one old people's home, this mother, demented but paranoid, you know. Angry, unhappy mind. Just we sang a few mantras like instantaneous peace.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you can give. Like babies, animals, because nothing else you can do. And that the power of it, just the soothingness of it first, just even itself, but the power, because it's the Buddhas, can help. If nothing else can, that's the one thing. And that, you know, it seems to me, even to have it so quietly, that it's like almost in the air, they're just there, that while they're sleeping. You couldn't do anything better than that, it seems. Not to mention the ones that have mantras on their body, that type of thing. All these practices that are mentioned in here. You see my point? Yeah. Yes.
Could I just make comment to that?
Yes.
People with dementia, there's research that shows that they respond incredibly well to music that they have loved.
Yes.
And so if that has a spiritual base, it would give more power
If it has a
to
spiritual base,
it
that's
actually awakens them. So not
Yes.
only does it
Uh-huh.
place them at, this is people who are still
Yes.
living, not imminently
Yes.
dying, but it awakens a part of their being that actually knows things, and then that enables them to recall
There you go.
memories and aspects of life
I
that was rich
understand.
for them.
Good.
So to therefore do what you're saying,
Yes,
it would
this
be
is such a
very
good idea.
potent.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And the key point, of course, the extra component here for the Buddhist one is that it puts an imprint of the Buddha in their mind, which is helping them get to the next life. That's the added piece, of course, which is not the way the West talks. But yeah, that's helpful to know, isn't it? So helpful. Yes.
I have a question. I've had two experiences of this with family members who've been quite lucid, but in the last 24 hours having hallucinations.
Yes.
You know, and verbalizing those. I'm just wondering what, I think I have some guesses to it, but I would just want to know.
Well, hallucinations, that could be, because it depends on the person and depends on the hallucinations, but that means their subtle mind is more vivid rather than the conceptual sensory, which is the grosser level. The subtle mind is more vivid, and it can very easily be, predictions of their future. Were these hallucinations difficult, tortured, fearful?
No,
peaceful?
quite pleasant in both situations. One was my uncle, who's a priest, but he wound up holding class.
He wanted what?
Holding a classroom,
Oh,
so he had students in the room.
okay,
He was sort of repeating his preachings, I guess.
okay.
But it was quite pleasant. He was
Okay.
quite calm, and he
Okay.
actually wanted us to sing along as well. And
Well, there you go.
he had us marching around the room, and
Well, yeah, it could be, it's like the dream mind. It's like just memories of things, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, yes, it's true. Recently, a friend of mine who died, who'd lived in India for years, and she was like a boss at one of the Indian centres, and she probably spoke Hindi. But when she died, suddenly she sat up before she died and started shouting orders in a language this woman didn't know. I'm assuming it was Hindi, So, I mean, it could, and then she died. So it could be bad or good, it doesn't matter. But some you do hear about people having, like the Steve Jobs one, oh wow, like blissful, radiant, light. They see the new life coming, the white light one. Or it can be like fearful. There's a friend of mine in Cairns, her nun, who sits with the dying. She said she'd never seen anything as horrific as this. This man, like, transformed into almost like a demon in a second. His eyes became red. He was screaming in agony, terrifying, like pushing away people. Unbelievable suffering, unbelievable torture, like hallucinations of future suffering lives, maybe. People often say, they use an example in the Lamb Rim of a person, let's say, who's been a butcher, who's killed animals, and I mean actually killed animals, that you have hallucinations of animals attacking you, this kind of thing. They're the karmic imprint. So that can just be just like dreams, I've heard that too before. Yeah, that's interesting. What else, people? So one of the things, once the person's, this is the bit here we're talking about, and finally what to do the hours before death. There's different. First of all, be quiet, totally quiet. Extremely important, essential that your loved one's not disturbed. Don't create any situation that disturbs their mind. This is the main point. Helping them avoid strong attachment and the other delusions during this time gives them a chance to have virtuous thoughts. That's the point, especially now. Recognize the stages of death. Well, if we can, we can. If we can't, we can't, This is a very typical thing they do, which is what you do for your animal, is lie them in the line, this posture that's on the picture of your cover, which is the way the Buddha is said to pass away. That's said to be a very auspicious way to pass away, One of the things they say, is to have mani pills, these pills that are blessed by His Holiness and many of the monks in Dharamsala, to have these crunched, to have these, there's two different things. To have, one of them is on the mouth. Give them to them. But that should be before you crush the pill and put it in water. But it should be while they can still swallow. It can't stay on their tongue. They should swallow it. That's a typical thing that Tibetans do. Or a relic of the Buddha. Same kind of thing, And then you just talk about whatever's appropriate for their mind. You do the practices. Talk about the Buddha. Talk about Jesus. Whatever. Touch, different texts, all the stuff that's been happening before, you focus on that now, And then you do prayers and things, or you could have, certainly, you could also organise, at this point you organise, like if you have, let's say you have a connection with a centre somewhere or a monastery, you get them to do prayers right now, sponsor pujas and things, that's really auspicious. So practices to do during the hours and days after the breath has stopped. So they also here now that your loved one's breath has stopped, apart from putting the blessed substances, another thing you can do on their crown, you shouldn't touch the body. It's possible that touching the wrong part of the body before the mind leaves can disturb the person. That's what this is, causing their consciousness to leave at that point and take a lower realm rebirth. Yeah. And this is where they always talk about if it's a Buddhist, you'd shout in their ear the name of their guru. Well, that's the thing, when I told you, when I shouted quietly into my friend Judy's ear when she was in a total dead coma, they didn't even think she'd come out alive. And she remembered crystal clear the words. So there's more to things that, I told you that story. I just, every now and again, I'd say to her, I went to the ICU, the unit at night, and I'd just say prayers next to her. She was she was in a coma, deep coma. And every now and again I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen is praying for you, that kind of thing. And they're the only thing she remembered. And that was usually like deep coma. Well, there she has, the senses aren't working, but she remembered it. So that's the point. Same here, you know, especially when they stop breathing. The mind's become more subtle now. Putting blessed substances on their crown chakra. So you can have mani pill or poa pill, different kinds of things. And it's all written about here. So where's Judy? So tell us, Judy, come up here, would you? I think Judy should come up. Come up and tell us about the group you've got. The group here that, you know, could certainly grow into a really good group to help the dying, you know. Like, tell us about what goes on. What you do in the group.
Well, here at Buddha House we have a Compassion Action Group, and it's a small number of volunteers who do attend the centre and who are Buddhist, and some of us are really a bit more trained or been around Buddhism a bit longer than others, and we have done the Karuna course.
Tell me what that is.
Karuna Hospice in Queensland put on this course called...
It's an FPMT centre.
FPMT centre.
Yeah, it's got like government funding, and they had, you know, palliative care.
Yes.
Not just for Buddhists, but they help everybody.
They help everybody. So we held... we held level 1 here at Buddha House, and we had 25 people, some Buddhists, some GPs, nurses, pharmacists, just Buddhist students, and it was very good. So that we can help people dying, you know, from any religion or no religion, or spiritually help them when they're dying to be peaceful. So also, if anybody has any problems or would like any assistance, they can always ring the office, and the office will contact one of our members, and we can go out and help. We do have what Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when we first got this box it was called the Death Box, and now they call it the Liberation Box.
Yeah, Rinpoche, because it's all these different things that Rinpoche recommends you do, like put blessed strings on people, put mantras on people, put a stupa, and they're all in here. He calls it a liberation box, and you get it from FPMT, and it's like a little death kit, you know.
A death kit. And also...
mantras, little texts.
On the body, yes,
special
blessed
mantras,
strings.
blessed strings,
and
wheel of prayer wheels, stupas.
And we do have some mustard seeds which
have
been blessed by Kensho Rinpoche, who was a previous teacher here at Buddha House.
Mm-hmm.
And also we also have access to things like from the Amitabha Hospice from EC, Venerable Robina.
Tell me about that.
Yes, there's a wonderful hospice in New Zealand that's
hospice service, like palliative care, like Karuna.
With many volunteers and lots of in-house training. So they actually put out a will for Buddhists, saying you can actually fill it out and say what practices you'd like said, what you'd like done with your ashes, would you like people to make donations, where to, and so if people want one of these I can direct them to the Amitabha Hospice website, or I've only got a few printed out, or
whatever.
And
what's this other thing? What's this?
Oh no, and they're just some of the cards, but actually some of those cards, that card now, the Nam Gama mantra,
they're in the... recommends Nam Gelma mantra, little baby one, the big one.
But they're actually one of those copies. There's a lovely, beautiful, colourful one is in the book now as well, isn't it?
Right, that's right, the book, yeah.
So what we're just saying is that if anybody needs any help, they can, one of us that have been, there's about 4 of us have done level 1.
And eventually as they grow, they're going to have their own website, their own coordinator.
Yeah, we are, that's right. So we can also always assist people or advise them or help them with some practices, give them some CDs or whatever they can play.
And you meet,
mantras.
how often you meet? Once a month?
Once a month.
Doing what?
We meet once a month, and then in the afternoon we have what we call the Medicine Buddha Support
What
Group.
do you do at your meeting?
The meeting,
What do you do when you
we
meet?
do a little bit of training, and if we have clients that we're visiting out in the community, we will share some of those experiences, or say, discuss how, if there was something we could have done better, what other ideas somebody else would have done to handle this, or advise them.
Good.
Just to support
And then you
each
do
other.
medicine Buddha Puja.
And then we do a meditation in the afternoon, and a cuppa and a chat, and then we do Medicine Buddha. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
1:30 till 4 o'clock on a Sunday.
Okay, fantastic.
Saturday, the 3rd Saturday of the month.
There we go. Fantastic. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
So also here, like different things on the crown, that's a really good point to practice to do. And then the other one is if this person has requested what they call the POA transference of consciousness. It's a particular practice, and again there's one related to Amitabha that's in this book written by Lama Yeshe, that can be done either by the person themselves over the period before they die, obviously because they've taken the initiation. It can be done by a Lama at this time, not before, or it can be done afterwards during the 49 days. And again, that's in the book. Then, if your loved one dies at home, so then there's a series of things where your loved one dies. So the ideal scenario, the one that Rinpoche always teaches, like I said, is the assumption of 3 days. So we call it if your loved one is at home when they die. So the assumption being you might be able to keep them for 3 days. And Rinpoche recommends all these different practices. But essentially they're the same practice, whether you've got the person for half an hour, but it's what you can do. And most people might do one thing. Most people might do 20 of these things. But because of Rinpoche's book, you've got to put them all in, That's why it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. But you do what you can, And so basically the 3 days would be you treat it like a shrine room, totally peaceful, totally quiet, only exactly as before, quiet, nothing else but the practices going on. In many of the monasteries, they do them 24 hours a day. They have the monks and nuns rotating. You can easily do that. Many people do that in their own home. And that's where you've got to be educated and know what the laws are. And often they're not as restricted as we think. They can be quite casual, what your rights are, the way your loved one dies, and what the law demands you do. When you know that, you know what you're doing, and you can plan for it, But that would be the really auspicious thing to do. You'd have pujas done in a monastery, and you'd be having your friends come over, and rotate. Even just one person in there for a few hours at a time, something like that. It's just so fantastic to do for the person. And then at the end of the day, 3 days, you do this, you check. There are various signs. That indicate the consciousness has left the body or not. Okay, before that, the particular practices Rinpoche always recommends, and the particular ones at the end, he would recommend, there's this typical thing they do in the monasteries called the 8 prayers to benefit the dead. One of those is the King of Prayers, which is always the one he recommends. If you can do all 8, fine. If not, do the King of Prayers. This is a key one that's said to be just fantastic, Another one is that prayer, the prayer for to be born in the Amitabha's Pure Land. You can have that recited as well. Then there's all sorts of other practices Rinpoche recommends, and they're all here, And then when it's time to check time to move the body, you should check that the mind has left the body. So that's in chapter 24. There are several ways to check, but as I mentioned, the easier, chapter 25. Here we go. So there's different signs that show the mind has gone. So no longer warm at the heart. This is the key one. So if the mind is there, it'll be distinctively warm. You'll feel it immediately. The rest of the body can be cold. Here will still be toasty. That shows the mind is still there. If it's cold there, that shows the mind is gone. And actually, the next one is, this is mentioned in more depth when we go through the death process. When your consciousness goes into the egg and the sperm of your mummy and daddy, what your subtle consciousness is doing is joining, as I said before, the way they describe, the subtler physical energy called the red and the white. The red from the mother and the white from the father. They took these components of the cells from the mother and father that join together, and you start at the heart chakra. So like I said, everything ends up here, and your very subtle consciousness or clear light consciousness is conjoined with this, what they call this indestructible drop. So when your consciousness leaves the body, depending on where it leaves from, here, the red and the white from your own body carries on down. Where is it? Oh, it's different for men and women. I can't remember which is which now. One goes up and comes out the nostril, and the other one goes out and comes out the sex organ. And that's a sign the mind has left the body. But that can be a bit difficult to locate if there's other messy stuff there, That could be difficult to see. The body smells, it's a pretty obvious one. But if the mind is still there, it won't smell. The flesh doesn't respond. It's a pretty obvious one, isn't it? If you press and it stays pressed, then the mind's gone. The head moves. That's interesting. I've heard that in the past. People, especially if the consciousness leaves from here, it can show the head can move slightly. Especially yogis, they say. So what you do to make sure, if you are confident the consciousness is gone, especially after 3 days, it's likely. But if it hasn't, especially the next lot, when you've only got a half an hour in the hospital, then as I said before, the thing to do is tap here very strongly or pull the hair very vigorously. Don't be polite about it, And because if you imagine in front of the spine is the subtle central channel, as they call it. And the consciousness can go from the heart chakra and it will go up the central channel and out through the crown chakra. And if it leaves through the crown chakra, they say a pure land rebirth is what it'll get, you know. So that's the best way to do, so you can help it. No matter, it seems to me, no matter what karma was triggered before you stop breathing. I'm a bit confused about that, but that's what they say. So then, if your loved one dies at hospital, that's where, you know, again, you've got to know your rights. Talk to Gabe beforehand. Well, if my loved one dies, don't touch her, okay? Let me know immediately. And you can I have as long as possible? Is there a spare room? Know what your rights are. And the point is, have as long as you possibly can. Take as long as you can to do as many of these different prayers that you can. That's the point. As long as you can without disturbing the body. The next one is if they die give the organs. So our friend Tim, who died, I mentioned, in North Carolina, he was pronounced dead at noon. Well, some of the nuns from that centre went there and did prayers, but every time he was giving his organs, so every time they had to come and do things and take blood or whatever they do, I don't know what they do, because he was kept alive, you know, he was breathing. They had to leave the room. They couldn't do much. But they had as much time as they could, and then finally midnight he'd been gone, and they'd taken all the organs. But they did what they can in that period, you know. And again, you wouldn't do that thing of doing the consciousness to leave, because they're still breathing. It'd be quite difficult. So even though they're going to cut the whole body up, when you get the body back, maybe it's still possible to, why not do that just in case, you know? I mean, who knows? It's hard to say. So the other one is if your loved one dies suddenly. And again, as I mentioned before, you've got to have your wits about you. And who has? Nobody. If you're a nurse or a doctor, you know what to do for CPR. But if you're a Buddhist, you should know what to be checking. Are they really dead? Do you think they're dead? Is it any benefit calling the doctor? What do you think? It's hard to know that, it seems to me. Especially if you don't realise what you're doing. You'll panic. Because people die suddenly, don't they, all the time? They drop dead in their soup. They drop dead in cars. You know, they collapse on the street. The key thing then, you know, and of course the key thing is that moment. It's really important how their mind was at that moment, which is determining the karma that would have been triggered. Because they go through the 8 stages exactly the same, but just quickly, that's all. But it's not the cool way to die. It's not the ideal way to die. Recently, just talking to a friend whose brother had a terrible car accident. He was drunk and he ran into a tree. It's in America. And she's been really worried and so anxious about it. But the point was, I told he didn't in fact die. He took 4 hours. He was in hospital. It was really terrible. They didn't even contact the family. They read about it in the newspaper. Can you imagine? The local police put it in the newspaper. They discovered from the newspaper that her son was dead. That's really terrible, isn't it? Very distressing. Anyway, the point is, and the sister was so anxious and worried, she's a Buddhist, because she was thinking of all the suffering and the pain he had in those 4 hours in the hospital. But actually, I said, I don't think so, because when you're unconscious like that, you don't feel your body. You're hallucinating, you're dreaming. It's like a dream. You're in a dream state, you know, in this intense struggle. And I said, it's far better that he had those 4 hours, because every second of that suffering, he was probably purifying, and he had a connection with Lama Zopa. You know, who knows? Whereas if he died suddenly, drunk, running into a tree, not so cool to die at that second and have your consciousness leave that second. That would have been much heavier. She felt much better about that, and she was going to tell the mother too, you know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm. Far better to have that 4 hours. And his mind could have been really blissful by that 4 hours, you know, you just don't know. And purified so much suffering. And time for the Buddhists to help him, you know. So it's difficult. But again, the same types of practices. And the other one is, if you're so fortunate to have a loved one who's a high yogi, this is very, I'll read you a bit of this, this is very nice. Don't disturb the meditator. So okay, I want to read you a bit from chapter 10 as well. So it's very inspiring, actually. This is, you know, about the great meditators. Okay. Okay, so generally it's not permitted to openly give details of the methods that the great yogis use. However, I feel it would be useful to talk briefly about them here. Death is the moment they've been waiting for, right? Like I said, you know. At the point in the death process when all the grosser consciousnesses have ceased and only the extremely subtle consciousness is left, those who have observed karma well, kept their precepts purely, spent their lives training their minds in the clear light meditation, and have been able to recognize the clear light at the time of death, they're qualified, you know, basically. In other words, this is the point, taking the Buddhist view of the mind, which is not the Western view, as I've been repeatedly saying. We've got the gross consciousness. Then you've got these subtler levels, and the only time we experience those is when we dream. And then what they call very subtle consciousness, which is the very subtlest level of your conscious being. So the yogis have spent their lives in all these, and we're going to discuss this in a minute, in these meditations, which if you've got any kind of deity initiations, tantric initiations, they're like structured to enable you, but he talks about it here. So they can remain in meditation, meditating on emptiness, getting realizations for as long as they like, 1 hour, 3 days, many months. Of course, this is just like not considered possible in the West. But this is exactly the point. So Lama Yeshe was many days in meditation. Many stories. His Holiness the Dalai Lama's main teacher, Ling Rinpoche, for example, stayed in meditation for 13 days. There are many examples like this. So by concentrating in this subtlest state without distraction, in other words, they go through the process but stay conscious at the ever subtle level. Not conscious at the gross level, because that's ceasing, but they don't lose the plot, They're able to go to the very subtle level because they've practiced all their lives with powerful single-pointed concentration. And the reason they want to get to that very subtle level is very simple, because that level of consciousness, I like to call it like the microscope of your mind. Because it's unencumbered by all the grosser levels, it's crystal clear and capable of getting all the realizations and even becoming enlightened at that point. It's a practical issue, not some cosmic hippie trippy thing, Yeah. Many Tibetan lamas So the practices these yogis do are available to those who have taken a highest Tantra initiation. They are the quickest methods to achieve enlightenment in one brief lifetime of this degenerate time. These practices have a very special arrangement, and doing the sadhana, the practice every day, is very important preparation for death. Basically. Yeah. So back to chapter 24, there's something in there I want to read to you about this. Okay. So the face of the meditator is very radiant. This is after they've died. Very peaceful, very radiant. Even blissful. They look magnificent, totally different from an ordinary dying person. As long as they're in meditation, even though the breath has stopped, there'll be no smell or decay. There's one of Rinpoche's lamas, he talks about him here. Okay, I'll mention it. Okay. So here in Tibetan ceremonies for the dead, the author says that for somebody who is in meditation, you should not consult. Okay, one of the things the Tibetans all do is they consult an astrologer. Not the kind of astrology we have, very different astrology, which is relating to the day they should take the body out, the day they should burn it, even indications of the next rebirth, that type of thing, So anyway, you wouldn't call an astrologer about what day to move the body because the mind is still there, so you wouldn't do that. So, however, if the meditation is not over, but for various reasons, such as the country's laws, you have no choice but to move the body, you need to request the meditator to end their meditation. So while you're requesting them, you can offer, whatever, things like this. Yeah. As I mentioned in chapter 21, Lama Yeshe passed away at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, a wonderful hospital. Before Lama passed away, the nurses were watching intently throughout the night. The moment Lama's heart stopped, people rushed in with a defibrillator and wanted to try to get it started again. It was all very hectic in the room. I had checked with Song Rinpoche, who earlier had come to be with Lama and now was back in Switzerland, and he said to do everything possible to save Lama. The defibrillator is very strong. It pulls the body up violently. Lama opened his eyes for a moment and then his body fell back down. The doctor then said there was no hope. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. This was my first time dealing with someone passing away in the West. I had no experience. Apparently they usually take the body to the mortuary where they prepare it, but I didn't think we needed to do that. That's for ordinary people, not for those who are in meditation state like Lama. Anyway, Lama remained in meditation in a private room throughout the day. By the late afternoon, we couldn't stay there any longer, so I asked Rinpoche what should be done to release Lama from his meditation. As I mentioned, Rinpoche advised me to play holy instruments, and so I made 3 prostrations and rang bells and requested Lama to stop. I also recited the prayer to be born in a pure land from the Vajrayogini practice, and I touched Lama's crown. This one. Of course, Lama didn't need all this, as he had already achieved the clear light and illusory body, all the high realizations. Apparently there was a candle, and one of the students present in the room said that he saw a second flame leap from the flame. I didn't see it. They put Lama's holy body in a box, packed in ice, and took it to a mortuary. The next day, one of the students, and it seemed like they gave permission at that time to take the body away again. Can you do that here? Like if you have a body, can you take the body back home? The law lets you do that here.
You couldn't do that.
Okay, that's an important point to remember. Yeah. If your granny dies at home, take him to Clinton. Clayton first, and then he can say, thanks a lot, I want me granny back, and he can give it to you. Because they wouldn't let us do it here. But then, back then they did, actually, when we had Lama. So they put him in the back of Tom Waggoner's truck, and he drove like really slowly the 500 miles between Los Angeles and up north, San Francisco, to the Bay, to Vajrapani Institute. So Lama remained in meditation. Anyway, then I mentioned Lama advised me, okay. So they put Lama's body in a box, packed with ice, blah, blah. Next day, the students drove, 350 miles, I exaggerated, north to Vajrapani Institute near Boulder Creek, very slowly, taking many hours. When they were preparing Lama's body for the fire puja, okay, were you there? Did you go to that? You around then? That was in 1980. What was it? 4? I keep forgetting. 4. Yeah, we were in London. I was working for Wisdom, so the 3 of us went there from London. We were there at Vajrapani Institute in the redwoods for about 10 days, I think. So Lama was all day in the hospital, and they drove him he was in the mortuary for a while, and they drove him down all the way up north. Then we kept him for like 5 days in his coffin, Anyway, I'll just read. So when they were preparing Lama's body for the fire puja, because what happens there, what they mean by a fire puja, everybody came from all over the world, a couple hundred people, and then they had this very elaborate, long fire puja. They build this kind of square, according to the structure, or according to the kind of the holy architecture, build this square kind of small kind of thing, fireplace with 4 walls, holes in each side, and then Lama's body is dressed up in certain things and put in a chair, then taken down and put into the thing, and then lots of oil and wood on him, and then they build up this cone shape on the top part with a hole in the top, and then someone comes and lights it and then burns the body, and then and all this special stuff is offered into it. It goes on for hours and hours. So when they're preparing Lama's body, he'd been in his coffin for like 4 or 5 days, and people who were in that room, who would always go in there, we'd go in there and do prayers and things. Everybody said it had a very sweet smell. His body was like 5 days already. It always had a very sweet smell. They said that when they prepared him to put him in the chair, his body was still flexible. Wasn't stiff, So one of the monks, one of the boys there, Lozang, who had been a monk, he knew all about these things. He was preparing the body to put it in the chair. He reported to Song Rinpoche that even though the body had been lying in the coffin for many days, Lama's limbs were very flexible, and that it was only when they were preparing Lama's body that the white drop came out. They noticed the white drop came out, I think through his sex organ. And that's a sign that his mind had been there for 5 days, meditating, during the drive and everything, So in other words, it seems that Lama had been in meditation state for at least 5 days, even though the body had been moved many times. Right. So the body of a meditator will start to smell when the meditation is finished. In other words, when the mind leaves, just like the bodies of ordinary people. On the other hand, no matter how long the meditator's mind remains in the body, days, months, or even years, there are stories of this, there'll be no smell. The red and the white drops coming out of the body, as with ordinary people, is also a sign that the meditator's mind has left the body. Yeah. So anyway, after bringing Lama's relics to Switzerland, because what happened was they did the fire puja, and then they seal all the little holes, then it's left for several days. And then Lama Zopa comes, or the student of the Lama, they come and they open it up and they look for what they call relics, pearl things, special little things that they say are holy, indicating, the meditator's realizations. After bringing Lamas, so they're all packed together, these things. I think there's another chapter here about the funeral. Hang on. Okay. going back and forth, a funeral service. You can have, okay. All right. Yeah, anyway. So they're all the relics, so repair the relics, whatever. Bless you. Okay. What am I saying? So anyway, the bringing Lama's relics to Switzerland means all the ashes. No, Rinpoche put ashes of Lama's ashes into little, vitamin capsules. And all the students got some of those. He says, vitamins for the mind, he said. Then the bones and things were kept, and then all the centres got relics. You must have here. So Rinpoche went to Dharamsala for teachings from the Dalai Lama after the funeral and everything. So then the day after the teachings had finished, there was a long life puja for His Holiness, but I couldn't attend because one of Lama's teachers, Gen Jumpa Wangdu, passed away early that morning, having been in meditation for 3 days. What was interesting, I remember at the time that this Lama passed away, there's another Lama, Lama Zopa was in London. No, somebody showed me photos. He died in meditation. He was like this, Some of these people, okay, I'm so many stories, so I get all mixed up, I'm so sorry. So, hang on. He passed away early that morning after having been in meditation for 3 days. One of the tantric monks that I checked to see if the bodhicitta had come out. It seemed the bodhicitta had, but not the red. Anyway, so it seems that anyway, I'm so sorry. But somebody showed me photos of him. They took photos. He'd been sitting in meditation in his meditation cloak, They took photos over those 3 days. And even by the 3rd day, his body had visibly shrunk. The head looked like poking up above the cloak, But it didn't rot. It doesn't rot as long as the mind is there, because the senses aren't working, so it does shrivel. But it doesn't stink, But it became distinctively smaller while he was in meditation. And then his mind leaves, Another sign the mind has left the body of a meditator while they're sitting up or lying down is that the head moves. That's what they say. It seems that Gen Jumpa Wangdu had chosen to pass away. He'd decided, on the very day of His Holiness Dalai Lama's long life puja, so that His Holiness could live a long life. In other words, he sacrificed his own life for His Holiness. I don't really understand this, but they often talk about that. People can choose to take on obstacles for someone else's sake, That's how they say. So many great practitioners become enlightened in the intermediate state. I haven't mentioned that yet. We're going back and forth between the death process and all these sorts of things. I've got more to say here. Okay. Okay, back to here. Back to where we were. Put things on the crown. Once they stop breathing, do the practices for 3 days. If they die suddenly, give their organs, all this business. Then you've got to prepare the body. Now you've got to prepare the body for the funeral. This is now practices to do after the mind has left the body. So one of the things to do, get sesame seeds, mustard seeds, water, perfume, talcum powder, or something similar. Now recite, Rinpoche says the Nam Gyalma mantra, one of the many, but he says any mantra will do. And then having blessed your breath with the recitation, you now blow on the stuff. And then you use this, and this is blessed, and you sprinkle that on the body. Usually I keep a big packet of mustard seeds or baby powder close by. Every day after I've chanted thousands of various mantras, I blow on the powder or seeds to bless them. I use them whenever I see dead insects or animals, or for people who have died. You could do the same. And also you could send the blessed seeds to other people for them to use when people die. So another thing you can do is if you've already not put written mantras on the body of your loved one, it's especially good to do so now. You could also use there's other different mantras, 11 mantras, this one, that one. But also you can do, like he says, Keti Sanchab Rinpoche does, you have long rolls of mantras and you wrap the body in it with the mantras touching the body. Then they get cremated with that, But you make sure you keep, if the body's going to be buried, you make sure you keep some of the hair or the nails or any part of the body. And if you have ashes, you keep these aside because you want to bless them. Another practice afterwards, and also I'll talk about now, is you bless, which is so beneficial, called jangwa. So the funeral service, you do what you do, You do what people do at funerals. But of course you could do here the King of Prayers, these types of ones. And then as, yeah. Okay. So how to bless your loved one's ashes and include them in holy objects. So as soon after the funeral service as possible, you should organise a jangwa. It's called jangwa practice. It's not in this version of the PDF, but it's in the wisdom version. You should organise a jangwa practice during which the Buddha's wisdom is invoked into the remains, thus purifying and blessing them. Keeping the ashes of your loved one that haven't been blessed has no benefit for the dead or the living. Whereas, as Kirti Senchab Rinpoche said, now that the ashes are purified and blessed with jangwa, they are actual relics or holy objects. Even if the person died with non-virtuous thoughts, which usually means it's definite to be born in the lower realms, and they are in the intermediate state, which I'm going to go back to and talk about in a minute, relying on methods such as jangwa can help them change direction and receive a human body instead, or even go to the Pure Lands. They're on the way to the lower realms because of the power of the Vajrayana, the power of the Buddha's words, and the power of the concentration of the Lama, or the person who does the practice. Suddenly the person changes their journey. Anyone can do the practice, but it's best if you have a qualified person. But if not, you do it yourselves. It's in the Lama Yeshe book, in the wisdom book, in English. You can just recite it. Next thing you can do is now you can even do more to benefit your loved one. Having blessed the ashes with jangwa, you can now include them in holy objects such as tsatsars, these little, bas-relief little statues, small little statues with the image on the front, made of plaster, or statues, or stupas, And there are some parts of there's different organisations of the FPM who do this. Like there's one in Queensland called the Enlightenment Stupa. Other people do it to work, don't they, Gabe? Gabe? Judy? Somebody? Yeah, other people. In the back here, there's all the websites and things. Hopefully in the wisdom book as well. You can you have these ashes mixed with the plaster, and then you can we often have, don't we, little containers of their ashes. Whereas it seems to me if you have a little image of the Buddha on your mantelpiece that's got their ashes in it, that feels more auspicious, doesn't it? It feels more kind of sweet somehow, doesn't it? Do you understand what I'm saying? And even if they're dead 20 years, you've got your ashes, drag them out, please, and get them blessed and make some satsars. It'll help them wherever they are. Some people say that you shouldn't... Okay, wait, never mind. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Or you could get the blessed ashes and throw them into the wind or in the water. And because they're blessed, all the sentient beings who get touched by them will be benefited. You can do that as well. Then there's all the practices to do during the 49 days. You can do that every day, 7 days a week. Other people do them, sponsor pujas, and there's millions of practices which he mentions. That's all. That's it. So then let's go back now to the death process and the intermediate state. And this is very fascinating. Freud would really have liked this. I will explain. All right. When I started having to travel, I realised I couldn't carry all my books and my newspapers and my magazines around, and I was very distressed because I was so attached to them. But attachment doesn't take long to change objects. Now I can never leave my iPad alone, it's in my hands all the time. I don't have a phone, I just use my iPad. Now all my books, and I look at newspapers and go, what's that dirty stuff? I used to be so attached to my newspapers. At the airport I buy like 10 kilos of magazines and newspapers, and now I have them on my iPad. And it's quite handy because you don't own them. Isn't it? You don't own them. You've got nothing to hand on to anybody else. I just have my iPad. When they clean up after me, I'll just have my iPad. Throw it away. Easy. No possessions. No, one set of robes, one computer, one iPad, 3 pairs of socks, 1 pair of shoes. So I'll be quite cheap when I die. Just chuck me on the fire, chuck my things on the fire with me. Be right.
Can I have your iPad?
You can have my iPad. Okay, where are we? Intermediate death process. What happens at death? Here we go. Okay. No, wrong one. All right. So So basically, from the time you stop breathing, the mind goes through these next stages of subtle consciousness. Everything gets more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. Never mind the details, it's all in the book. And you get to very subtle consciousness, they say. The subtlest level of your being, beyond which it can't be subtler. And if you like, it's the receptacle of all the karmic imprints. All your bank vaults are in there, okay? All your karmic seeds, okay? So the seed that was determined your next life is already done. So in our case, let's say Clayton waiting for Faye and Donald. Yes. Wasn't it? That's right. To do their trip, he's sitting there impatient in the intermediate state, waiting for them to jump into bed, right? And then when they do, this is what happened. This is what happened, Clayton. This is what happened, according to these people. So the intermediate state basically is like a dream. It's the best way to call it. It's your subtle consciousness, the same as the dream state. And depending on the karma that ripened, it can be very powerful, like a terrible nightmare dream, or it can be quite a pleasant dream. But a dream is the experience of it, weird and strange and, all over the place, and quite intense. And then, so then when you knew Mummy and Daddy, in his case, Faye and Donald, hopped into bed, wherever they hopped, what happened is this. The moment his consciousness left that body, the past life, Tenzin's body, the Tibetan monk, the past life, we're just pretending he probably was, who knows. He went in, so you go through, from the time of death, the second the very subtle consciousness leaves, you go the reverse process into the intermediate state. You go through these 8 stages and you kind of wake up in a kind of a mini life. It's like an intermediate state. My feeling is it's like the Christian's idea of purgatory. Yeah, really is. Very interesting, People's observations, they call it purgatory. So he would have seen the world he just left. He would have seen Tibet and the Tibetans in his monastery, but he wouldn't have recognised it any longer because karma's finished. It's all over, Unlike when you're sitting hovering above your own body in the operating room, the karma hasn't finished yet, and you'll go back there. But here, karma finished, So then he's in the intermediate state, and then when Faye and Donald hopped into bed, this is what happened. Or you can spend up to 49 days, they say. Different things happen, but up to 49 human days. Lord knows what the experience at the time is, it's probably something else, but 49 human days. So then, okay, if from the intermediate state you will take rebirth as a human, you will see your future parents in sexual union. If you are to be born as a male, you'll be attracted to the mother and will have aversion for the father. And if as a female, you'll be attracted to the father and have aversion for the mother. Because of the habit, the karmic imprint of attachment to sexual union, the intermediate state being will want to embrace, have sexual intercourse with the one it's attracted to. But as it approaches, and that's like in a millisecond, he doesn't have to fly on an aeroplane from Tibet to Adelaide, just in 1 millisecond. Next, he's there in Adelaide, next to Fred and next to Donald and Faye, and he runs like a magnet to his mummy. But as it approaches, it doesn't see it. All it sees is that it doesn't see the body of the parents, only the sexual organs, which causes anger to arise. And this anger becomes the condition for the intermediate state being to die, and then its mind to enter the mother. You see, Buddha talks about this as a desire realm. It's created by desire from countless lives, by attachment. And so it's intense attachment to your next parents that causes rebirth. As Rinpoche says very politely, it is easy to see how ordinary birth is caused by delusions and karma. But I have to say there's some very interesting discussion recently about this. Okay, never mind that. Cancel that. Okay, any questions? 2:30. Any questions? Any questions of any kind about anything? Because I haven't covered everything. Yes, sweetheart. Okay.
This might sound very provocative, and I don't mean it to be or
I'll be provocative.
rude.
I'm join the club.
Okay, so at the time of death, they're drawn to the one of the opposite sex. How does this account, or is there any accounting? Is there any accounting in Buddhist tradition for homosexual
I understand.
people?
No, I understand that. And I think about it, and I can't quite work it out. You see, the way, whatever it is we're born, however we're born, the point is, you see, Buddha's understanding of attachment It's the motor that causes any kind of rebirth. It's the motor that it's the energy that causes us to have a male body, a female body, for whether we're attracted to chocolate cakes or carrots, or having sex with an animal, or having sex with a person looking like you, or now these days more and more people wanting to be another gender. So it's all because of attachment, which is not criticising people. I mean, it sounds like really cruel, like you're saying transgender people are attachment. We're all driven by attachment. Having anything at all, of any kind of body, the way we're driven is just by attachment. So whatever it is, attachment has caused it. So, this is a typical one of how you get born. So whether that again refers to a person who ends up liking boys in a boy's body, I just don't know. I mean, this is a very traditional way, but based on the yogis, probably of a heterosexual person. I mean, so what would it be? I mean, then you start to think about what about now when people, like, what happens is, and again, even different lamas, I've asked different questions about if you're fertilized in a petri dish, the egg and the sperm, right? So one lama was very clear and said that this consciousness cannot go into the petri dish. The condition that is absolutely crucial for a consciousness to go there, let's say Clayton's parents couldn't conceive, so they put their egg and their sperm in a petri dish. Well, this particular lama said there's no way Clayton's consciousness could ever go there until the egg and sperm were implanted in her womb or wherever they're implanted. Because the condition that's necessary is the presence of the human body, you understand? But another lama said exactly the opposite. So it's really hard to know, and all these yogis say different things. Now, the other point is this. I heard about cloning. I only really understood that someone explained to me what they do about cloning. They take any cell from any person. It doesn't even have to be a male or a female. So that makes complete nonsense of this business of it having to be a white and a red from the male and the female. So there must be male and female components, however they call it, in all the cells. Because, that dolly, that goat or dog or sheep or whatever, that was coming from a cell from another female. There was 2 female cells, and that became the basis of a consciousness to go there. So it's very interesting. I'd like to hear what the yogis have to say about that, because, I mean, this is kind of old-fashioned Buddha days, Do you understand? So who knows? I don't know. So as to whether, it's attachment that causes us to have any kind of body, any kind of sex organs, any attachment, for whatever it might be. And then the part of the suffering of attachment, you see, is this. Like, especially there you are, you're born in like, even just now, people, it's okay to be homosexual these days. You can even get married, right? Imagine 50 years ago, Adelaide, you probably go to prison, right? Still, isn't it? And look at the way society would see you. So you could say that part of the suffering of that karma, you're born in a male body and you're like other boys. Well, you've got this very heavy karma called bad reputation. You're considered a monster. People criticise you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's another whole component of it. But why you're born in a boy's body and you're attached to other boys, they would say it's some, I don't know about imbalance, but some attachment. It's all attachment. In the end, it's all attachment, You're born as a girl and you crave boys. What's the difference? There's no difference. And it's just attachment. It's caused by attachment. But part of the suffering, let's say you're transgender, and it's very common these days, and more, it's always been the same probably, but people now are coming out more and more and getting the surgery, all the what do you call it, the systems are there now to help you. Can you actually get vaginas and penises and everything now?
Yes.
You see, that's an interesting discussion, that one, because the Buddhist view talks about these subtle physical energies. So it's all very fascinating. But you can see part of the suffering of attachment, part of the main suffering of attachment is when you can't get the object. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there you are, born as a homosexual in a world that thinks you're a monster. The suffering isn't because, the suffering is number 1 because the world thinks you're terrible and you've got to sneak around at night and do it. And number 3, you can never find a partner in the open. So that's the suffering of being born homosexual. Technically speaking, born homosexual is not the cause of suffering. Being transgender is not the cause of suffering. It's because, you hanker after being in ladies' clothes, for example. Which I find very fascinating because it shows it's sort of culture. It's kind of culture. Karma's culture, It's interesting to think about, that's all. Not criticising anybody, just thinking about it. Do you understand, people? But the suffering of attachment the real suffering of attachment is when you can't get the object. And then the suffering of attachment is when you get the object and then you think you're going to get satisfied, but all you do is get fat. Like if it's food, you turn into 400 pounds, isn't it? So the suffering of attachment, whichever way you turn, is going to be, it's a no-win. You get the object and you get too much of it and you get exhausted. Or you can't get it and you're miserable. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a something of attachment altogether. So it's a difficult one. But it's kind of a bit of a controversial topic, because it sounds like, I remember saying this sometime when there was a transgender person in the audience, and they felt absolutely shattered, like I criticised transgenders. But it's not that. It's just looking at the mind and the human and how we cause things. You understand? Because we all cause it ourselves from past lives, How come you want to have sex with a furry a furry toy? It proves emptiness, actually. It proves emptiness. Then you go, Sampanos, my friend, he's considered normal, right? Because he liked girl shapes. Living girl shapes with skin, and breasts here and a couple of holes there or whatever. Whereas the furry guy, he even tried real animals, but he prefers his piece of felt cloth. So he'd go to the shop, buy a piece of felt cloth, buy a couple of beads, cut it out, stuff it full, call it Mickey Mouse, and he gets turned on. It proves we make up everything. It proves we make it all up. Do you understand? We're very fascinating. Yes.
Bina, I'm experiencing very real anguish because my grandfather survived the Battle of the Somme, which killed over 1 million people, and now it's the anniversary of it. Now, I've been a hippie and a Buddhist and an activist, and I've been into peace all my life, and I don't understand why I'm experiencing such severe anguish at this anniversary.
What do you mean anguish, don't explain?
I just get tearful. Anything to do with soldiers, guns, battles, blood, anything, any slight reminder makes me cry. So there's some attachment here, and I want you to unpack it so that I can feel better.
Well, that's your job, not mine. So, darling, so you got to explain a little bit more than the anguish, because anguish is a very big word.
Anything to do with war, battles, soldiers.
So it makes you upset or nervous or fearful or angry? Which one?
It's compassion, it's anguish, it's
but only war.
It's just that particular war.
So not like
a family member of mine survived it.
But that particular war?
Yes.
No other wars?
Well, I suppose
you don't care. They can all slaughter each other. You don't mind.
Any hint of it. But for months now, I've found myself really distraught, and I feel there's something karmic or there's some attachment that I'm not dealing with. Because I've always been a peace activist and a hippie and a Buddhist and somebody who thinks war is wrong. Even as a very small child, I was telling my dad, war is wrong, Daddy. People get hurt, Daddy. So I've always been very anti-war, but now it's really bereaving me. So there's some attachment, yes? Or some karma?
So, okay. Okay. We can see, can't we, that our mind is capable of taking something and then thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then holding on strongly to it, and then we say all these stories in our head, don't we? That's how we spend most of our lives, wouldn't you agree? Well, that seems to be, join the universe here again, no criticism. That would seem to be what you're doing. For some reason, since you're very little, I think it's just because you've got the habit since you're little. So obviously, since you're little, you've got some imprint to not, have you killed in your life, or you never killed? Like
No,
since a little girl, you never liked to kill.
No,
so it seems to me...
I got upset when other children did it.
Okay, well, my interpretation, just for what it's worth, is that you're due to past non-killing, past karma in the past lives to non-killing, and you're born into this life, and then you see killing, and you had aversion for it, or you didn't like it, other people did it. But obviously, you've got a creative mind, which is attachment mind, we've all got it. So clearly you heard about your grandpa dying in Somme and 1 million people died.
No, he survived it. He died
he survived
later.
it, okay. So you heard about from him the story. He told you about it. So obviously you're a little girl and he told you the story, right? You probably, that's what happens. When we're young, we're very fresh. And the vivid images stay. I never forget when I was 7 and I was jealous of my 8-year-old sister because Nanny, my grandma, allowed her to come and listen to all the radio shows before they had the television shows. They were like the radio shows, and there's one of them in Melbourne. It was about the local police show, And it was called D24. It was the murder squad of the Melbourne police. It was a radio show. And I was really jealous of my sister. So I stood by the doorway and I listened to this radio program. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. The imprint was so intense. We had a crazy family. But I'd heard about this girl called Shirley who was standing on Flinders Street in Melbourne waiting for her boyfriend John. And the boy drove up and she said, "Oh, hello, is that John?" And he said, "No, John sent me." And then he took her to Mount Martha and raped her and killed her. Now, all I can say is, in my mind, still, there's a vivid image of this happening. The distress in my mind. I thought about it. So on and on I thought about it. Well, that's all that's happened to you, darling. You've heard about it since you were very little. Your little mind has picked up on this. It blew your mind when you first heard 1 million people dying, and it's been in your mind ever since, and you're like a dog with a bone. So you've got to go somewhere with it, which is mean not just keep chewing the bone. You've then got to understand, if you say you're a Buddhist, you've got to start explaining to yourself, according to Buddhism, why there was a war of 1 million people dying. Not just go on about it, which is what attachment does. You've got to go further. Use this as the basis of your compassion, which first means you have to have an understanding of why it happened, which is karma. Then you have compassion, and then you go, and I'm going to never give up, continuing to work on myself so I can become a Buddha, so I can help all these suffering sentient beings. Then you utilize the suffering and the anguish, and you turn it into action. Otherwise it makes us insane.
So I just have to convert it into compassion more clearly.
Precisely, darling. But you've first got to have an explanation for why it happens. Does the view of karma make sense to you? Is that powerful for you? But if you don't unpack that properly, it'll just be this anguish. In other words, the anguish is, why did that happen? This is terrible. That's not helpful. Karma is a Buddha's explanation for why. That's up to you, if you like the Buddha's view, to explain it to yourself. And once you explain why it happens, you stop the stress, and then you go, and I must continue to do what I can to help sentient beings. Then you're turning the anguish and the dog with a bone and the attachment and the fears into action. That's what the bodhisattvas do, and they become courageous and never give up working for sentient beings. And suffering is grist for the mill for their compassion.
Thank you. I was getting confused. You're right, though. Anguish is a precursor of compassion, and I can just push it a bit.
Move forward with it. Use
Thank
it,
you.
darling. It's compassion. But I think it's a very strong one for you since you're a little girl. You heard it and it blew your mind. 1 million people dying. It blew your mind. And it's been there all this time. So open it up, use it, explain, and then act. Because this is the world, honey, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the suffering of this earth, is it not? And that's the grist for the mill for the bodhisattvas. Endless compassion. They never give up. They think in terms of eons, His Holiness says. Being reborn and reborn to help others, never giving up. That's the courage of the bodhisattva. Do you understand, darling? Yes.
I have a girlfriend who's terminally ill, and I anticipate I have very little impact on her environment
Yes,
due to
I
her
understand.
family.
That's right.
I'm just wondering if there's anything I can do, perhaps
Distance, you mean?
from a bit more
Yes,
of a
the
distance.
Buddhist view would say absolutely plenty. Saying mantras, having prayers and stuff done for her. You know, I mean, this is where, Judy, do you recommend people, do you one of the tools that you use is you get people to email Kopan Monastery and sponsor pujas? Talk to Judy. There's lots of things you could do, darling, yourself, and also have monasteries do prayers. This can be very powerful. Absolutely. Anybody else? Yes, sweetheart.
Robina, I'm just wondering what I can take away with this. I did share this once here before with another teacher. When I went nursing at the Children's Hospital, it was always a joke that when I went on that ward, someone would die that night.
Okay.
And when I was 18, I used to do specialing, and that meant you were with one child all night. And 3 nights in a row, at about the same time, each little baby died with me. And all I had done up until that point was be with the child. I never sensed any distress in any of them. I mean, they might have been, but I wasn't sensing it. But I would just be aware of the breathing in, the breathing out, and the things I had to do. And then there would be a split second when I would sense something coming into the room, like what I would have called as a Catholic an archangel, but a light. There was no form. And I thought, because I only imagined things walking through doors, I imagined it was coming through the door, and I would look up, and then I'd be aware, split second later, and the child, that was it.
Okay.
So I just wonder what I can just do with that for myself, my own.
I don't know. What do you mean? I mean,
Well, I'm not sure.
what view of the world do you have? Do you have a Catholic view, a Christian view, what are you? I mean, do you have a view yourself? Because in the end, it's how we interpret these things ourselves, isn't it? What's your view of this? What makes sense to you?
That all I'm doing is walking towards, not me exactly now, but walking towards enlightenment. That's what would have come out of that.
Okay, well, that's good enough then. Perfect, darling. I think what you just said is fine. I can't say more to it. I don't think I need to say more to it.
Okay.
I can try and give you a Buddhist interpretation, but I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you.
I mean, all it says to me, all these stories reinforce to me is, Clayton's story about the something coming, the spiritual something, is reinforced in every culture. There's obviously something more than the body. That, if nothing else, that for me is the interpretation going on here. There's more stuff than we think,
Yeah.
That there is stuff that's subtler and more powerful and more holy and more amazing. That I can say, whether you call them Buddhas or archangels, I don't care, That seems to me the main point that I think is the common ground, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Over here. We've still got 6 more postcards. Anybody want more postcards? Prisoners? They're up here and the addresses. Okay. Go on, darling. Yes, yes. Go on.
It's joking.
Yes.
Robina, I
Yes.
love that karma. Let me get this right. Karma is the Buddha's answer to why.
Yes, that's right.
I love that.
Well, that's helpful, is it? Well, good.
Yeah, and the lady down the back that was speaking to you about the war,
Yeah.
where you said that,
Yeah.
asked the question why.
Well, the karma explains why. So, which means being killed is the fruit of having killed. One of the 4 ways that karma ripens, good or bad karma, one of the 4 ways that karma ripens is called an experience. It's the experience of so there's 2 in this life. There's 2 main ways. 3 actually. One track of karma, which is how I like to call it, is your tendencies, your personality traits. So one of the experiences of having killed in the past is you get born in this life with a tendency to keep killing. The fisherman was an example. The other way that killing ripens from the past is as an experience of getting killed or dying young. Now clearly look at the world. People die on their own. They get killed in the womb. They die as babies. So your life runs short or you get killed. So obviously what a war is a group of people all together creating the cause by killing in the future life to experience the results, but in this life, the ones who died experiencing the results of past killing. And as we all do things in groups, look at us, we're here as a group. We're very social beings. We do things as groups, so we experience the results as groups, isn't it? So that is a simple enough explanation of why people die in wars, Isn't it? Simple enough. So if you have the view of karma and you're using the view of karma as the basis of your life, which is as a Buddhist I probably suggest you would, certainly the view I'm using, then as soon as I think the biggest cause of our suffering is when we say, why is this happening? Now it's a very interesting point this. I find this very helpful. I read a couple of years ago about one of those Air Asia flights that went down in Malaysia, and all the people died. So the parents were interviewed. How do you feel about the death of your daughter? Well, they were devoted to God. And they said, she belongs to God. He has taken her back. We are peaceful. Now, if you analyse that, what they have got is a clear philosophical explanation to the answer, why did my daughter die? And look at the result for them. They were peaceful because that was the view they bought into. Now, a materialist there is no explanation. So we pull our hair out and go mad and say, why do bad things happen? We don't have an answer. So that's the reason, my feeling, for much of the intense suffering. When you have the materialist view. I'm not being critical. It's logical. If you have the view that your mother made you, if you have the view that your mind is the brain, if you have the view that you didn't ask to get born, isn't it true? Then of course you've got no explanation for why some person would come up and murder you. It's just no explanation. There is no explanation according to that philosophy. So that's what it means. You're going to be racking your brains. Why do bad things happen? And we can't get past that point. Now, a Buddhist, these young Tibetan nuns, I always quote this story, back in 2003, Richard Gere, invited the Dalai Lama to New York, and he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. And of course I was based in the States then. He asked me to come too, and other people who are working with people in prison. And so it was a very moving day. These ex-prisoners, or black, white, male, female, Puerto Rican, Mexican, whatever, cross-section of Americans, all this wonderful meeting, all the suffering and their dramas and the racism and the sexism and the blah, 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 So then they all met the Dalai Lama, they all had a happy day, and he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns. Well, there they were, and their philosophical position was the one of karma. That's in the bones of their being, just like those Muslim mummy and daddy, in the bones of their being was this explanation of God, which they bought into and accepted. Well, a Buddhist buys into and accepts the view of karma. So they didn't have the question, why does this happen to me? They don't sit there, with anguish about it. They have suffered. There's no question they suffered. But they didn't have the question, why is this happening? Because their view, their model says they know why. It's called karma. The Muslims, they know why. It's God's plan. Well, the Westerners, we don't have a reason, so we pull our hair out. I'm not criticising. I'm looking at the implications of the philosophical views we all carry around in our head. But we mostly don't realise we've got philosophical views in our head. Do you understand my point? Yeah. So that's 2 examples, So those Tibetans, at the end, they were in tears. They weren't angry because they weren't angry. They weren't saying, how dare this happen to us? They knew from their point of view why it's happening, so they dealt with it. It was intense suffering. They were raped and sexually abused and tortured for a couple of years, So then they finally they got out, and then they said at the end of the day, very quiet, tears in their eyes, and then they said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. Now that's their philosophical position, which they were using as the basis of interpreting their life. And this is our job, it seems to me, to look into these things and just scrape below the surface. Don't just accept our assumptions. Look into these things. It's up to you. You can be a materialist, a communist, a feminist, I don't care, but look into these things. And, for me in my life, I always wanted sort of answers and understandings of things. So I was a Catholic first, then a hippie, then a radical lefty, then a feminist. Now I'm finally a Buddhist, I haven't given on that one yet. It's been 40 years so far. So far so good is all I can say, But really the way, I think we don't realise that our emotional responses to things are just the tip of the iceberg. They're based on the views we hold in our mind. So we better start unpacking our own assumptions, our own philosophical views. Do you see my point here? Yes. This is our job. It's my life. Who else is going to do it if I don't? So the view you have, it's useful for that Christian, for those Muslims. They were peaceful. Another friend of mine, who's a Buddhist, happens to be black, in America, works with people in prison, and then we had a conference in San Francisco, and there was one of the topics in it was restorative justice. And so there was a white mummy whose daughter had been raped and murdered, and there was a black daddy, my friend Andre, whose son had been murdered, and they were talking about their responses and the one of restorative justice, the woman who had been always wanting to meet the prisoner, the guy who raped and murdered her daughter. So he was very happy to meet her. They had a very moving conversation. She was a very devoted Christian. And he told her that before I shot your daughter, she looked me in the eyes and said, I forgive you, and God does too. Now, in the end, whatever comes out of our mouth, it's a viewpoint, isn't it? And that informs the way we respond to life. So that's up to us to find the viewpoints we want to work with, isn't it, basically? Do you see my point down there, sweetheart? We've got to unpack our own feelings and thoughts and emotions and look at our thoughts, our feeling, our assumptions, our viewpoints about things. And that's our job, That's our job. Yeah. So that's what I said to you. That's your call, how to interpret that, Do you understand? So if the Christian one makes sense. You could also argue, we could all debate about these things, and because, the Buddhists would, whatever. That's up to us, though, isn't it? So what else, people? It's only 10 to 3 and I think we're finished. Yes, sweetheart?
I suspect that if I truly believed all of these teachings that I hold so dear, that I would lead a very different life than I do. And if I truly believed in karma, I don't think I would buy into this ordinary life that I spend most of my time involved in. So I guess it's doubt. I guess I must not believe it, even though it feels like I do. And
You know,
wonder
well,
if you have any advice.
that's a very interesting point. Shall I tell you the way I would say it? First of all, for myself, I never use the word belief because I think we can get intellectually lazy when we say belief. Like, what I'm saying here is Buddha, this bloke called Buddha, was this regular guy who came out of this amazing Indian tradition of these extraordinary beings who are the ones who actually, more than 3,000 years ago, who created this remarkable psychological skill known broadly these days as mindfulness meditation, with this remarkable sophisticated skill that enables a person to plumb the depths of their own conscious mind, their actual cognitive process itself. It's extremely sophisticated, not some trippy, hippie, cosmic thing like we think in the West. It's remarkable. And on the basis of this, they actually mapped the mind. So it's astonishing. On the basis of this, they became more subtle. They were able to have clairvoyance. All of this fits with this model of the mind. And Buddha took these techniques and then moved in his own direction 500 years later, So the point is about the Buddha, he's not a creator, okay? So if you think that thought, it's quite intense. Normally speaking, when we think of religion or spiritual, we assume, and that's the creator religions, and I'm not criticizing. I was a very devoted Catholic. The creator religions necessarily is belief, because the worst crime, sin of pride, would be to actually to try and unpack God's mind and work out what his plan is. That's not our job. If I've got complete faith in God, it's surrendering my delusions and completely merging with God as a superior being, who is my creator, whose information I trust. That's the approach, but that is not the Buddhist approach. Buddha's a regular guy who, from his own direct experience, has come up with every word that we've said in this room. That's the assumption here. So in other words, if I'm Einstein, spending the day telling you about relativity, you know perfectly well you would never say, oh, I believe in relativity. You'd know that it's an advanced concept. You'd know that I, being Einstein, must have come up with this. You know I didn't have a revelation of it. You know it's not a dream. You know I didn't have a vision. You hope I'm not making it up. You are sure it must have come from my own direct experience. Is that not our approach to science? Well, that's Buddha's approach. It's just that we're so used to believing, that if you can't see it, you can't prove it. So you've got to shift your assumptions. Take the view coming from these Indians more than 3,000 years ago, these amazing sophisticated thinkers who came up with this direct experience of subtler levels of mind. It's all there, and these techniques are still living today, being practiced by millions of people. So the Buddha's view is he is not a creator. This is not from on high. This is his own direct experience. And as the Dalai Lama says, it's either, if you're going along, following, let's say, like Einstein's methods to prove that Einstein's right or wrong, that's how you practice Buddhism. You're going each step of the way, and each step of the way you tick the box and you experience it for yourself and you verify it. But if you get to a certain point where you prove that it's wrong, and that's what you do when you're engaging in something, then he's wrong and you must reject him. That's the approach. So I would not say that your faith isn't strong enough. I would say, because this is a subtle point and it's really intense and we are addicted to the opposite, that it takes time to even intellectually get confidence in this model of the world. So don't put yourself down. It takes time, honey, because we're addicted to the opposite. We're addicted to the view that we didn't ask to get born. We're addicted to believing we're just the body. We're addicted to the samsaric methods, which we've been practicing for countless lives. So be humble and recognise it takes time to shift. So one step at a time, It's okay. You understand my point?
I do.
Yeah. Now, as I was saying, this is Buddha's view. It's up to us, What else, people? I'm happy to keep talking whatever you like. You can tell. Just press the button and I'll talk. That's fine. I mean, you want to know more about karma? I hope to talk about karma. Whatever you want. You just ask me and I'll make the most of our time as you wish.
Yeah, please talk about karma.
Talk about karma?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I will. No, I'm happy to. I'm happy to talk about karma in more detail and also how we purify karma. I'll do that. Yes, sweetheart.
Robina, there's something that comes up a lot for me in the last year or so, and that's something I've believed in too. Is, ever heard of the phrase "shit happens"?
Yes, darling.
You have.
And that means?
Well, to me, it's to understand why shit happens and to surrender to it.
Oh, so you feel that?
To be active with it.
So you feel that's the approach, that you don't know. Shit happens seems to me that you don't know why it happens. Isn't that the view?
Well,
Shit happens?
no, it's an acceptance of it happening.
Yeah, but there's an assumption there that no one knows why it happens, so you might as well accept it. I disagree with that fundamentally. I mean, if you've got a Buddhist view, you wouldn't say that. That to me is saying no one knows why, so you might as well accept it. No, don't bash your head against a brick wall. Whereas the Buddhist view is there's always an explanation. It's a natural law. And everything, there is an explanation, just that we have to learn it slowly, first theoretically and then experientially. Do you see my point? Would you agree with that aspect?
I have to think about it.
Okay, good. Fantastic. What?
Why do we have to know it? Why do we have to understand?
You mean you don't want to know why things happen? You don't want to know how to make it. You don't want to know how to make a cake. You don't want to know about how gardens work. You don't want to understand how to use your computer. You really saying that seriously?
No, but we can't know everything.
Excuse me, again, excuse me, I would suggest you look at that assumption. Who told you that? Why do you believe that? That's exactly my point. That's an assumption of the materialist view. Buddha would disagree with you. That's my point. That's up to you to decide. Do you understand? And yet that would be a good view if you're a Christian or a Muslim, because God knows everything and you don't. Yes. And then you'd use that as the basis of your faith and you'd surrender. Or you're a materialist and we don't know the answers yet and we assume we can't. Or you're a Buddhist and you would never say that if you did. Do you see my point? This is a question of what's the view. Look at our assumptions. They're very huge in us. We've all got them. We just don't realise. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Buddha would say by death. Okay, Buddha's view is this. That our consciousness, our mind, this river of mental moments that is necessarily beginningless and endless, the product of the law of cause and effect, is got the potential. This is the point of all of this business. This is the goal, is to become an enlightened mind, a Buddha. We're talking psychology here. Please, okay. So what would you be like when you're fully enlightened? And Buddha would say this is the natural potential of every single mind. And he would say humans are just a tiny percentage of all minds. The term sentient being, that's translated in English from the Tibetan or the Indian, the Hindu, whatever the Sanskrit, is actually the Tibetan term is mind possessor. The Buddha would say there are trillions of minds pervading universes. There's not an atom of space you won't find minds. And Buddha's teachings, and it's dealt with extensively in all the literature, is that every mind naturally possesses the potential to be perfect. Omniscience is the first characteristic. So I was a Catholic. I know all about omniscience. God is omniscient. Well, Buddha says, honey, you can become omniscient. Buddha's deal is that that's the nature and the natural potential of every mind. And they go into it extensively. And when they describe the nature of mind and how it functions and what it is, it's vast in Buddhist literature. The first characteristic is, and that right now we don't have that because we, as thick as posts, our mind is stuck in this body. We don't remember most of today, forget about yesterday, forget about a past life, because our gross level of conceptuality and sensory consciousness just doesn't have the capacity. So as we progress spiritually, lessening the delusions and growing our virtues and goodness and wisdom, then literally you expand your consciousness and you start to cognize phenomena that the grosser level can't, which is the past and the future and the minds of others, until eventually you removed all pollution from your consciousness, which means your consciousness now pervades wherever there is existence. It knows how things exist as they exist naturally, which includes knowing the minds of all sentient beings perfectly, which you also have because you've gone beyond ego totally. You now have infinite empathy and compassion for every single sentient being, as if you were oneness with every one of them, and you have the power to do whatever needs to be done for as long as time exists to manifest in countless bodies throughout countless universes to benefit all these suffering countless sentient beings. Now that's a Buddha. So I'm not going to hold my breath. Way to go. But all the Buddhist techniques and methodology and practices are leading us to that. That's the way it's laid out. So, Buddha might be a maniac and leading me up a garden path. Well, I've got to find out, don't I? I'm not going to sit there and just blindly believe him. That's intellectual laziness. I have to engage in it. So one step at a time. Okay. So the one of karma, I know when I first met the teachings, the Buddha, like I told you, Chen Raising Institute, 40 years ago, last month. It was like I heard the word karma, and I knew that was something I'd never heard before. I never heard this word before, And that's something been for me most powerful as a Buddhist somehow, most powerful. Because I always in my life, I was always, like a sticky beak, and busybody and, bossy and everything. So I just always was interested in interested in the way things are, why happiness, why suffering. I never went the scientific way, I had no interest, I sort of went the political way, the social way, the religious way first, and then back to the Buddhist one when I was about 30, 31 or whatever it was, So then all I can say is, since then, all I'm doing is, and I mean it, I say it sincerely like this, taking the Buddhist view as my working hypothesis. It's the only way to say it for me. It makes me relaxed. It's not just to sort of stuff it down my throat and say I believe it, which I find makes me anxious. I don't want to believe something. I don't want to believe in relativity. I don't want to believe in mathematics. What's the point of believing in mathematics? Oh, I believe in mathematics. I'm very happy for you. Please go and get me 2 oranges. Oh, but I don't know what 2 means. Well, what's the point of believing it? You've got to practice it. So I'd rather never say believe, because it becomes intellectual laziness. But I've got to take it, I've got to start somewhere. I've got to start with the intellectual concepts, the thoughts, the theories, isn't it? What else can you do? One step at a time. One step at a time. So me, I have interest in learning the Buddha's view, interest in understanding the law of karma, the laws of karma, understanding emptiness, understanding the methods, understanding the words. Start with the words. Be relaxed about it. I mean, if you want to become an acupuncturist, I use this as an example, 50 years ago in Adelaide, I bet you if you met a Chinese person, they said they want to stick a needle in you, you'd sue them. But now we all know all about acupuncture. But back then you thought this wacko person, because we assumed as a given that the allopathic was the only medical system. We never even heard of anything else. So imagine back then, you say, don't be ridiculous. First you heard it. But let's say you heard it again. Then you've got an open mind. You would have gone, well, that's interesting. Maybe there's something in acupuncture. I might look into it. That's the first thing you do. But you can't rush in and start intuitively putting needles in people. You've got to start learning the theories, don't you? And that means you've got to put aside the whole allopathic series of assumptions about health and open your mind to the possibility of a brand new system that you've never heard of before. So you've got to have a brave mind to do that. It's a brand new language. You can't squeeze it into the allopathic system. You've got to look at your assumptions, put them aside, and learn this new one. But learn what? Learn the theories. Learn the theories. You haven't got a clue it's true yet. It sounds completely ridiculous. But you've got to learn the theories. And then every day you go to class and you learn more theories, well, the pieces of the puzzle begin to put together, don't they? But theoretically only. You've got nowhere near anybody with a needle yet. You're learning the theories about this and the liver and that and the kidneys and the meridians and the airs and the blah, blah, blah. It's a brand new model, but each day you study it. Taking it as your working hypothesis, pennies begin to drop, theoretically still. Is that not how we learn something? Are we surprised by that? This is how we learn everything. Well, that's how that's how I'm learning Buddhism. Well, I'm not in no hurry to have an experience of it. I'm not clairvoyant. Eventually, one day I will be, but I'm learning the theories. And if the theories are valid, each step of the way, and this is my point, they have to be coherent. The theories have to be coherent. They're not cosmic. We think spiritual means cosmic, wow, cross your fingers, put a needle there, wow, visions, blah. It's superstition beyond belief, our views about spiritual. It's disgusting. It's embarrassing. So Buddha's, it's his method, his view of the world. They study it for 40 years in the Tibetan monastic university systems. Then they go meditate on it to try and have the pennies to drop, to get the experience of it. You can't force it. You can't go quicker than you can. It's only one step at a time. You've got to start with the theories. Where else would you start? Sticking needles in people. How else can you play music if you haven't learned Bach? You don't put the hands on the piano and hope Bach will channel himself through you. That's what we think of spiritual means. I mean, we're ridiculous. And all Buddhism is, this is how it's studied in the Tibetan monastic university system, which I find very appealing. It's a vast world view. He might be a load of rubbish, but you've got to find out. You know, even this is what I find most shocking, because we're so used to wanting to believe somebody. I'm not talking about you here believing, okay? We all use that word very easily. But I remember going to one of the centres where they study philosophy quite in depth, and we were discussing all these things. We were discussing the different views about emptiness. And one of the students, who's studying very well, he said, oh, but which view am I supposed to believe? I was speechless. You don't believe anybody. You use your own noggin and work it out. Because Buddha says all this stuff is natural law. Emptiness is just how things are. Karma is a natural law. That every millisecond of every single mind, every millisecond of what it does in this really sophisticated, intricate process that one has to learn is sowing seeds, is leaving imprints, is programming itself. And that is what produces future experiences. As the Dalai Lama says, we are like our own creator. It's the only way to say it. The other two options are it's the materialist world only and no one knows the answers yet, or it's creators. Well, this is the third one, okay? So that's up to us to look into these. If we want to, we don't have to. No one's forcing us, you know. So it's true, your point about karma is so intense. Of course, if we really, so put it this way, not that you believe karma, but put it this way, if you have a direct experience of the truth of karma, it's true, we'd be profoundly different. But it takes time. That's all, it takes time. So not believing it strongly, because that's like forcing. It's having confidence in it from your own direct experience, which will probably come when you get clairvoyance. Do you understand my point? Then we'll have more then we'll because at the moment we're addicted to other views. The view of self-existence, the view of being material, the view of my mind is my brain, the view that I didn't ask to get born, the view that it's not my fault. We're sort of stumbling along, and that's the views in our mind right now, and they're very deeply ingrained. So be patient and be humble, you know. One step at a time, you know. So like I'm saying, with karma, the Buddha's view is every millisecond of every single sentient being, we're sowing seeds that will produce our own future. Right this second, we're experiencing the fruits of our past, and each second we're sowing the seeds that will produce our future. And that's why the garden is such a perfect analogy. What is in your garden right now, we know logically, is the fruit of seeds. And it's your garden, honey, so you must have planted them. So own it. Own the lousy husband, the beautiful daughter, the $1 million in the bank, the $1 million being stolen. Own the sickness, own the goodness, whatever it is, it's your karmic appearance, Buddha says. We are the creators in a kind of, not in a magic wand sense, but in an evolutionary sense. We are the cause of whatever we experience, of whatever's in our mind, and the way the environment impacts upon us, and even this, our actual humanity. We are the boss. Maybe because I like being the boss, I like karma so much. Do you understand? Because then it forces you to take responsibility. It forces you to be accountable. This is my life. I made my bed, so I made my bed, so I've got to lie on it. All these wonderful sayings we have in the West, you know. The karma is the essence of that one. I come into this world fully programmed, with all my own tendencies, with the causes for my experiences, with the causes for the way the environment impacts upon me, you know. And then by looking at my garden now, I recognise I don't like those weeds, so I better find out what they're called and stop sowing them. And I do like the flowers, so I better find out how to grow more of those. Pretty simple, you know. I don't want the suffering, and I do want the happiness. It's hardly a no-brainer. So, learning the words. I can't just say I like karma. What good is that? I've got to know the nuts and bolts of karma, and it's all there in the literature to the extent that we want to study it ourselves and put meat on the bones of it, you know, as a philosophy. Are we communicating? You know, I think it's ridiculous. It's time to go home. Come on. I mean, you can stay till 6 o'clock tonight, and if I did a Lama Zopa on you, I'd say keep you till midnight. But I won't do that. I value my reputation too much. So I think we've covered lots of things, have we not?
Yes.
Food for thought, everybody? Yes. So the essence of all this is just whatever you end up, if you believe in God, I don't care. If you believe in Lenin, I don't care. But keep living your life, keep practicing morality for your sake and the sake of others. And if the one of death makes any sense, look into these things more, learn these skills, help others, you know. And maybe Clayton can have a few little tricks up his sleeve now, and whisper mantras in the ears, and who knows what he can do. How many dead bodies you deal with every day?
We handle probably 7 funerals in a week.
7 funerals. Okay.
So 7 families.
Right. So much of your job is being a good, kind person to people, isn't it? That's your main job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
To serve the living, but also show
There you
respect
go.
to the deceased.
Absolutely. Yeah. You a Christian, Clayton? Yeah. Devoted to God. So these weird ideas of the Buddhist views must be peculiar to hear then.
No, I'm a Catholic background, but I'm what they call lapsed Catholic.
Oh, okay.
I go to church every day with funerals, so I see all of
It's
them.
true, you do. That's exactly right.
So we can or avoid.
So you're a Catholic boy. Okay, I was a Catholic girl. You got educated by the priests?
Yeah, St. Ignatius.
That's the Jesuits.
Norwood.
The Jesuits? Oh, yeah. Have they got a Sacré-Cœur convent in Adelaide?
No, they've got a Loreto, and
Oh, there's a
also
Loreto.
the charism of St Ignatius is also present in the the Josephites.
Oh, I see.
Which
Is it?
most
Okay.
people don't know.
Oh,
but
there you
it's-
go. Okay.
And also at Ross Trevor.
Hey?
The Jesuits up at
But they're Marxists.
Newton there. There's Jesuits there too.
Oh, there. Yeah, my brother was educated by the Jesuits. All my six siblings have all given up religion, given up God.
Yeah. Well, I don't go to church Sundays. I'm not being disrespectful. But
No, I understand.
It's my day off.
I understand. You go. That's right. That's right. Well, good, everybody. So I want to thank you all for having me for these 2 weeks. All right. And I want to thank Buddha House and Gabe and Judy and all the amazing teams here. I think you do an incredible job, you guys. Amazing job, this place. Wonderful. So we should sing a little prayer. We can do it at the end. We'll sing the prayer at the end. You want to say something?
And
She's
I
looking at me. I don't know what's
don't
happening.
like to stand on the ceremony,
All right.
Robina.
Okay.
But on behalf of all of us,
yes,
it's always an incredible pleasure to have you here.
Good job.
And personally, I find it a real treat. You know, Robina I've known for many, many years. We've shared the same teacher and many of the same teachings and experiences around the world, and it's just always such an incredible delight
Good job.
when you're here. But I also know that she is here to shake and rattle and rearrange our conceptions.
Oh, really?
And but I actually I
bossy,
treasure
isn't it?
that. I look forward to it, and you know, in the time that she has been here, she's been incredibly helpful with Judy and I. As you know, we've bought a new centre, and we're about to embark on a whole new exciting period for Buddha House, and Venerable Robina has helped us to
because we worked out
really expand our view.
That's right, because we've got to bring in $800 a day to pay the bills. And so we've been looking at how to bring in $800 a day. And it's not impossible. Isn't it, Judy? Not impossible.
Not the Lamingtons to
Not the Lamingtons. Anyway, thank you, Gabe.
Thank you so much.
All right, darling.
Robina.
Yeah. Thank you, darling. Here, come on, I don't want to cut it. There you go. Thank you. All right, people, let's do a little prayer, shall we? Just a little baby prayer. We just think. Every millisecond of what we thought and heard, Buddha would say, has not gone astray. It's programmed our minds. So let's go and kind of nourish these seeds, you know, with our efforts, with our virtue, with our goodness, with our courage, to develop our own marvellous potential so we can help others. Compassion is not enough. That's what helps us. That's what is the wish to help others, but it's the wisdom that informs the compassion. And that needs to be filled with iron and strength, clarity and wisdom. Then we will never give up helping. As the Dalai Lama says, bodhisattvas think in terms of eons. And my way of saying it is, even if you're drowning, you might as well stay perky. That's the attitude of the bodhisattvas, okay? So you might as well. I always figure, what's the point of, you know, life is bad enough. Why be miserable as well? So I'd like staying on top of it, you know. Then everything's possible. And we'll never get overwhelmed. That's the thing about the bodhisattvas. They never get overwhelmed, you know. The courage of the bodhisattvas. So we all have that potential. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up, okay? And that's all. We don't need to sing any prayers. May bodhicittas exist and may all our holy beings live long lives. May all we live long lives so we can be of benefit to others. Okay, that'll do. That's enough. Don't you think? Don't need Tibetan words. That'll do for the English words. Okay?
Stay put.
Stay put.
Yes.
We should have photos. We'll be taking photos of this group. Have we been taking photos?
Yes, I didn't today.
We should take photos. Come on.
Should we have a group shot?
I know. Well, can't you take a group shot from this direction? I'll just sit here. Or doesn't? You can't do it.
No, we sit around you.
All right, then come on then. Squeeze in. Okay, come on. Come on, everybody.